now that the AFL season has been completed, we get to the off-season where we get the trade period. I won't be talking too much about trades here, but I think that we're in for a pretty good trade period. I'm not going to say it's going to be a really massive one. I think we will definitely see... I think we'll see a couple of surprises, as we usually see. Like, I think one last year was obviously like Jaguar O'Meara, who went to Fremantle pretty late, and Tom Mitchell leaving Hawthorn, going to Collingwood. There are a couple of players that just came out of nowhere. There hasn't been a lot of trade news really in the past week or so, so there will be a couple more. We will be doing a trade video later in the week, so I hope you guys stick around for that. A couple of players did request trades to Sydney, so the Sydney Swan supporter, I'm really happy about that, and they've been linked to a lot of other players, so I think this is a really good trade period for the Swans. I think big clubs going into this trade period will be Sydney, Port Adelaide. I think they're linked to a lot of players. I think it'll be interesting how Carlton go. I think that'll be interesting how they go there. I think both the premiership teams, grand final teams in Brisbane and Collingwood would be interesting. Essendon, I think, is a very interesting club as well, because there are a few players going there, but there's also a few players leaving. And Essendon have always been pretty active in the off-season period, so they've really got an important season coming up next year, Essendon, and they've got an important off-season to kickstart that. I think Fremantle are in a pretty big hole with the trade period. They've only been linked to Jeremy Sharp, who's a player who didn't play an AFL game this year. So I think Fremantle have got some big problems. I don't think they're going to improve much at all if they don't do something massive in the trade period. I think also the Crows will be interesting, actually. The Crows look like they're definitely going to be jumping up next year. They could be one of the bigger risers next year, so I think they'll be interesting how they go. Richmond bringing in Jacob Kaczynski will be good. I will be a little bit surprised if they don't bring in a little bit more Richmond. I think they need a little bit more with Adamuze coming in. I think Hawthorn, even though I mentioned him, I haven't really mentioned much about Hawthorn, but I do think that even though they missed out on a couple, they will be bringing a couple in. And I think Hawthorn, they kind of know this isn't just, they can't just look at the trade period in this draft. This is a couple of years in the making here. They've already been linked to Aaron Norton and a couple of others going into next trade period. So that will be interesting how that goes. Geelong, again, not really linked to a lot. I'll be very interested to see how they go in the off-season. I think they're probably the most interesting club to look at because they haven't been linked to a lot, and a lot of their players, a few retired, but not a lot. And it'll be interesting how they go because they haven't been linked to a lot. They usually bring in some pretty big names in trade periods. They don't usually look at the draft, and they're already looking at trading out their pick 7. So it'll be interesting how Geelong go because I do think they need to update their lists. They have still got a lot of older players on there, and if they don't make their club is basically built off of making finals every year. And they've only missed, I think this was the second time since 2006 or 7. So they don't miss very often, Geelong. So, they need to find a way to make the finals again. And, because I don't really see it with the list that they've got. We saw that when they got a few injuries into their club, their bottom's rung of players, their depth was just shot. They had nothing because their VFL side is playing They don't really do that well. You can kind of see it. If you look at the VFL ladders over the past couple of years, I don't think they've made the finals in 3 or 4 years, even though they won a premiership last year, And a lot of clubs are built off of their depth, and Geelong really haven't been for a while. So they've kind of been top-heavy, and I think that this is a really interesting trade period for them because I don't see them going to the draft. They're already looking at getting rid of their pick 7, so they have to do something in the trade period, but they haven't been linked to a lot. They're obviously linked to Brody Grundy very early on and a little bit to Sean Darcy, but other than that, they've been really not much at all. And I do think there's a little bit more for Geelong despite, other than just getting a ruckman here. They need to reset their midfield. They need to bring in a couple of defenders, in my opinion. And their forward line, yes, it's good, but I think both their tall forwards are getting quite old now. Tom Hawkins definitely, and Jeremy Cameron's getting up there too. So, yeah, and Jeremy Cameron's a pretty agile player. So, we saw Buddy Franklin obviously get through a few more years as an agile forward because he was able to sit down into the goal square for a lot for Sydney. But yeah, I think that's something Geelong seriously need to consider. I think that Melbourne are off with a bit of a rough start. They look like they're losing at least 2, Harms and Jordan. Looks like they're really only linked to Shane McAdams. So I don't know how Melbourne are going to go as well, and they do need to improve because they do have the room now because Brodie Grundy's out the door, he's gone. But yeah, they need to fix up. They need to get a tall forward. I don't know why again they're not linked to maybe your child. He's the biggest forward out there they can look at, and none of these teams have been looked at him. The only one who has is Hawthorn, and I think it's a really good acquisition if Hawthorn can get him because the Crows and Brisbane are the other two candidates. And I don't think they need him at all. So yeah, I think a lot of clubs like Fremantle, Melbourne need to be looking at a player like maybe your child or looking at next year because there is a lot of forwards, tall forwards next year who are uncontracted. We've got Todd Marshall, Jamara Ugle-Hagan, Norton, and I think Ben King at this stage are those four. Those four are 50-plus goal kickers in the making, if not 60, 70-plus. We've seen Todd Marshall's an excellent kick for goal from set shot, except in the finals. Jamara Ugle-Hagan is, Buddy Franklin in the making almost. Aaron Norton's one of the best contested marks in the comp, and Ben King's just, pretty much all of those combined almost. So, this needs to be looked at by these big clubs in Victoria. And I think also Fremantle seriously need to go hard for Aaron Norton because he is from WA, I believe. So I think that's a big thing that Fremantle need to do. I think even this year, they need to look at getting rid of a couple of players if they have to send to Western Bulldogs and go, we are looking at Aaron Norton seriously. You could lose him for nothing next year, except maybe a compensation pick, which isn't going to do much because we've already heard that the next couple of years of draft is all midfield heavy, so they're not going to be able to do anything with Aaron Norton compensation. So Fremantle need to go hard this time and go, we want Aaron Norton at the club. Convince him to come back to WA because I'm 99% sure he comes from there and get him to the club because even though some people would say he's a defender, this guy is a proven key forward mark and Fremantle have never been able to attract a key forward to their club basically since Pavlich left. And ever since before then, they really didn't. I really can't remember the history of Fremantle tall forwards because Pavlich was a draft. And, they got Jesse Hogan to the club, but then again, he failed at Fremantle. Obviously went to the Giants and had a pretty good season for them. But, yeah, I think Aaron Norton needs to be looked at by a lot of clubs, and Fremantle need to be the front runner there. They need to throw the bank at him. I think they're also looking at getting rid of Sean Darcy, even though I don't like the idea of Fremantle losing him because I think he's up there as a top 5 ruckman in the comp. If they need to free some space to get a player like Aaron Norton, who's potentially going to push you a couple of extra spots up the ladder, they just have to do it. They can't think about things like, but we've put a lot of time into Sean Darcy. You've got Luke Jackson there now. You need to look at this and move forward and go, Luke Jackson's not going to be a forward. Sean Darcy's not going to be a forward. Neither of them want to be sitting in the waffle. So, and neither of them are midfielders. I know Jackson's played a little bit of midfield time and was okay, but that's not the spot for him. He's a ruckman. He's a Nick Nat Nui type almost, and he's proven that he can play a sole ruck when Sean Darcy went down with injury throughout the year. So this is when Fremantle seriously need to have an off season where they're either doing everything they can to bring Norton in this year, or do everything they can to stock up on picks and a potential player to go for him next year, Aaron Norton. I think he's very interesting to look at as well. Sorry, I kind of just focused on Fremantle for a minute, but I think that's an interesting take. I don't know if anyone else believes me. But, St Kilda, I don't know how they're going to go. West Coast, interesting that a lot of players have decided to stay. I think it's very good of them. They've delisted quite a few, and I agree with that, but also think that they should be getting rid of their older players. They've got rid of a few, but there's a lot there. I think Andrew Gaff is very lucky to be sitting in the West Coast list next year because I don't think he's had a good year at all. I know there's a lot of West Coast supporters who defend their club to no end, and I get that. I defend Sydney in a lot of thoughts, but also you got to sit there and look at the big picture that Andrew Gaff's not going to be there for your next premiership. He's not. Players like a couple of players that got delisted could have been. I'm not saying that they would have been, but I do think there was a couple of tough ones. Like Foley, for one, I thought he was a pretty decent player. Connor West, I thought he was okay, and Greg Clark, I don't know. But I mean, I feel like keeping one of them on the list before Andrew Gaff would have been a better option, in my opinion. I don't know. I don't know West Coast as well as I know other clubs, but I just, from the outside looking in, I think that would have been a little bit more of a better idea. but that's just me. And I don't know if there's any other clubs I missed. Gold Coast, interesting. I don't know what they're going to do with Tim Hardwick. I don't think that they'll get Dustin Martin this year. They don't have enough to do it. And next year, he's another year older. I don't know if it's the right idea. We will see. GWS, I think Elliot Himmelberg's been pretty much the only player linked to them. But I don't know if they need to do a lot. I know it's a big thing saying that for GWS because, like I said, if you're not getting players in, you're not doing much. But I feel like they've got a lot of depth running through the Giants. And, I think there will be. I think they do need to fill some holes though. There are obviously holes. They got on a big run into the finals. That's the big thing that happened. I think that happened with Sydney last year. They kind of overstepped their bounds almost and got all the way to a grand final. GWS were 1 point away from it. So yeah, I think the Giants do need to look and need to look for a little bit more than just Elliot Himmelberg. But again, at the end of the day, they only picked up Toby Bedford in the trade period last year, and he was one of the best half forwards in the comp. So yeah, we'll see how that one plays out. I think that's all the clubs really for the trade period going in. So yeah, I think that's my thoughts on every club going into the trade period.